The public execution. Anatomy of a political ambush. The air in the Senate Judiciary Committee room wasn't merely tense, it was electrically charged. A volatile mixture of partisan fury and controlled, predatory focus. Bang! The sound of Adam Schiff's fist striking the rich mahogany table was the sound of a starting gun. A detonation that shattered the fragile pretense of Senate decorum. It was an echo of a political era that had grown weary of subtlety and embraced the savage spectacle. Papers fluttered. A water glass succumbed to the shockwave, spilling its contents across the highly polished surface. A metaphor for the morning's proceedings already spiraling out of control. "You're nothing but a backwards Louisiana hillbilly in cheap glasses." The words, delivered with surgical precision and undisguised contempt, were not mere insults, they were a declaration of war. A calculated attempt to psychologically obliterate an opponent. Schiff, standing at his full, 65-year-old height, finger pointed like a prosecutor's weapon, was a picture of righteous indignation. Or perhaps, more accurately, panicked overcompensation. The fluorescent lights caught the sheen of sweat on his forehead, the thin, visible veins at his temples betrayed the sheer, desperate effort of his performance. He was committed to the high-stakes theater of political immolation. Across the divide, Senator John Kennedy received the tirade not with flinch or fury, but with a terrifying, almost monastic calm. He was the eye of the hurricane. As Schiff raged about the Louisiana backwater and the embarrassment to the Senate, Kennedy calmly produced a handkerchief from his breast pocket. His movement was slow, deliberate, unhurried, a masterpiece of nonverbal resistance. He methodically cleaned his wire-rimmed glasses, each circular motion a silent counterpoint to Schiff's frenzied shouting. Kennedy's weathered, steady hands, the hands of a man who had seen things, who understood patience, were an anchor in the storm. That small, almost pitying smile playing at the corners of his mouth was more devastating than any retaliatory shout could have been. It communicated a singular, terrifying thought. I see your anger. And I have nothing but time. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on FBI oversight, meant to be a dry, technical review of bureaucracy and procedure, had been transformed into a political cockfight on C-SPAN. When Schiff roared, "You defended Trump. You're too stupid to understand complex intelligence." The Democratic gallery erupted, their cheers fueled by months, even years, of pent-up political frustration. The chamber, designed for deliberation under marble columns, became a rally hall, a digital soundbite factory. Reporters, initially dozing through the technical testimony, were now a frenzy of furious typing. This was the story. One sitting senator calling another a backwards hillbilly on national television. But the emotional gravity of the room lay not with the senators or the press, but with the quiet dignity of one spectator, Maria Gonzalez. The 52-year-old Louisiana woman sat rigidly still in the front row. A black dress and a photograph of her son, Lieutenant Marcus Gonzalez, USMC, killed in Afghanistan in 2018, pinned to her lapel. She had driven 6 hours to be here, responding to a quiet invitation from Senator Kennedy's office. She hadn't come for the political theater, she had come for something heavier. Something tied to the cost of duty and the integrity of American leadership. Her presence, a silent rebuke to the superficiality of the partisan battle, underscored the gravity of the stakes. This wasn't just about political power, it was about the truth that ordinary Americans rely on. Republicans on the committee were shifting nervously. This was beyond the pale of normal friction, it was deeply personal. Ugly, a toxic spill in the chamber. Democrats, conversely, were electrified, their phones already up, filming the golden clip for social media virality. Schiff was providing the sound and the fury, he was winning the moment. Then, Kennedy finished his ritual. The handkerchief was folded, returned to his pocket, his gaze settled on Schiff. Remarkably, unnervingly calm. Senator Schiff. Kennedy's Louisiana draw was soft, almost gentle, cutting through the residual noise. "Are you quite finished?" Schiff's face darkened, his commitment to the attack blinding him. "I haven't even started with you. You." "That's unfortunate," Kennedy interrupted, his politeness a lethal weapon. "Because I have a question for you." The room, which had been buzzing with Democratic victory cheers just moments before, began to fall into a heavy silence. Kennedy's tone, that unshakable calm, began to pierce the bubble of Schiff's rage. Even Schiff sensed the shift, the sudden change in the tide, though he was too far out to swim back. Kennedy's weathered hand slid across the table to rest upon a thick manila folder. It was marked in bold block letters, Schiff, Russia investigation. From the gallery, even Maria Gonzalez could see the ominous red classified stamps visible on the edges. Schiff's eyes widened, a barely perceptible flicker, a tiny crack in his facade. But it was enough. The cameras caught it. Kennedy saw it. You told the American people. Kennedy's voice was still soft, but now it possessed a quality that carried to every corner of the vast room. The tone of a judge delivering a verdict. For 3 years that you had evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, more than circumstantial evidence. You said it again and again and again. He paused, letting the statement hang like the dust after an explosion, allowing the sheer weight of the claim, 3 years, countless television appearances, to settle upon his opponent. Where is it? Senator Schiff's mouth opened, his throat worked, a visible spasm of a man caught in a snare. That's classified information, I can't discuss. Can't? Kennedy interrupted, still gentle, still devastating, or never existed. The silence that followed was a physical entity, heavy and oppressive. The enthusiastic cheers had died. The frantic typing in the media section slowed to a crawl. Chairman Lindsey Graham, whose gavel had failed moments earlier, now sat utterly still. Schiff, scrambling for a political escape hatch, lunged for the predictable defense. This is intimidation, political intimidation. The illusion of evidence, deconstructing the Russia narrative. The low, almost imperceptible hum of the projector cutting through the suffocating silence was the sound of reality asserting itself. The committee room lights dimmed automatically, transforming the space from a forum for legislative debate into a theater of political accountability. The large screen behind Senator Kennedy flared to life, delivering a visual indictment stark enough to make a seasoned political operative gasp. Against a blood-red background, a visceral choice, suggesting the bleeding of public trust, the core contradiction was laid bare. Schiff claimed more than circumstantial evidence. Directly below it, Durham report, no evidence existed. The gasps were audible, rippling through the remaining gallery. It wasn't just the contradiction itself, which had been public knowledge for months, but the breathtaking directness of the presentation. In the nuanced world of Washington politics, sins are usually wrapped in layers of plausible deniability. Here, the lie was stripped naked and presented for the entire nation to witness. Kennedy rose slowly, moving to the side of the screen. He held a laser pointer, and the small, red dot appeared on the projected timeline like a high-powered gun sight. Methodical and inescapable, his Louisiana draw, now entirely devoid of its earlier gentle cadence, took on the rhythmic, analytical tone of a prosecutor carefully building a case of deception. March 20, 2017, Kennedy began, his voice drilling into the silence. NBC's Meet the Press. Senator Schiff, you told Chuck Todd, and I quote, "I have seen more than circumstantial evidence of collusion." The screen transitioned, displaying the archived clip, a younger Schiff, hair immaculately groomed, looking straight into the camera with an air of absolute, unassailable certainty. There is evidence of collusion. His recorded voice echoed through the chamber. And I've seen it. This was not merely a memory lapse or a misstatement. This was the meticulous documentation of a narrative constructed in plain sight. Kennedy's red dot moved. May 2017. CNN with Jake Tapper. Another clip. The case is being built. Schiff declared on screen. The evidence is damning. The sheer volume of evidence presented by Kennedy was itself a weapon. He was documenting a political campaign carried out not in dark rooms, but in the glaring light of television cameras. This was the machinery of the modern political narrative. The Intelligence Committee chairman, granted access to the nation's deepest secrets, leveraging that credibility to lend authority to a theory that Kennedy was demonstrating was fundamentally baseless. July 2017, MSNBC. This clip showed Schiff reading from a document, the Steele dossier. Kennedy narrated, "You read portions of it into the congressional record, giving it the weight of official testimony. This specific act, Kennedy's analysis implied, was the most egregious abuse of congressional privilege. By inserting discredited, opposition research-funded documents into the official record, Schiff had attempted to transmute political gossip into governmental truth, blurring the sacrosanct lines between campaigning and governance. Point of order. Schiff jumped to his feet, nearly sending his chair tumbling. His voice was ragged, desperate. Point of order. Chairman Graham's gavel, silent during Kennedy's methodical presentation, came down once, a sharp crack of final authority. Senator Schiff, you'll get your turn. Let Senator Kennedy present his evidence. As you presented yours. There was an unmistakable edge to Graham's tone, not just of judicial impatience, but of professional disgust. Schiff, recognizing the absolute futility of protest, sat down heavily, his jaw clenched, the picture of a commander whose defenses had been breached. Kennedy continued, unperturbed, as if the interruption were a minor fly. October 2017, ABC's This Week. You said, quote, "There is clear evidence of collusion." November 2017, CBS Face the Nation. "The evidence is more than sufficient." January 2018, CNN again. "The case is undeniable." Those are out of context. Schiff burst out, his carefully constructed composure finally crumbling. You're cherry-picking." Kennedy stopped. He turned from the screen. His gaze direct, unblinking, out of context. He repeated, slowly, letting the phrase hang in the air. "All of them?" The inquiry was not aggressive, it was merely factual, which made it far more lethal. "Yes, all 37 television appearances?" Kennedy asked. "All out of context?" The number hung in the air, 37. It was the crushing weight of repetition, the relentless, daily drumbeat designed to embed the narrative into the public consciousness. The screen changed again, launching into a rapid-fire montage. A political horror reel. Schiff on CNN. MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS. The camera angles shifted, the tie colors change, but the message remained the same. Repeated like a damning mantra. "I've seen the evidence. More than circumstantial. The case is clear. Collusion occurred." The montage played for exactly 60 seconds. 37 separate moments of conviction condensed into one devastating minute. It was the visual and auditory proof of a sustained, systemic campaign to influence public opinion using the authority of the Intelligence Committee. When the minute concluded, the silence in the room was absolute, the air thick with disbelief and dawning comprehension. Then, the true nature of the deceit was delivered, not by Kennedy's words, but by the cold, official conclusions of 3 separate investigations. The screen shifted. Mueller report, March 2019. Did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. IG Horowitz report, December 2019-17. Significant errors and omissions in FISA applications. No evidence to support probable cause. Durham report, May 2023. FBI had no predicated evidence. Investigation should not have been opened. The entire premise was false. This trinity of reports, the independent counsel, the internal watchdog, and the special counsel, formed an insurmountable wall of facts against Schiff's claims. The entire premise of 3 years of political warfare, 3 years of cable news drama, 3 years of fractured national confidence, had been officially designated a fabrication. Kennedy returned to his seat and picked up the physical Durham report. The authoritative blue cover a stark contrast to the red-themed lies on the screen. He opened it and began reading, quote, "Neither U.S. law enforcement nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation." He looked up at Schiff, his voice laced with the cold sting of undeniable fact. "Senator, as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, you had access to the same classified information that Robert Mueller had. The same information that John Durham reviewed. You saw what they saw." Kennedy's voice hardened, just a slight, lethal edge. "Yet for 3 years, you went on national television 37 times and told the American people that you had seen evidence. Evidence that, as these 3 independent investigations have now conclusively shown, never existed. I had a different interpretation." Schiff protested weakly, his voice high-pitched and defensive. The intelligence was ambiguous. Interpretation. Kennedy interrupted, cutting him off with the final, damning analysis. The evidence wasn't ambiguous. Senator, it wasn't there. You weren't interpreting evidence. You were fabricating it. This was the core of the political crime. It was the shift from political spin to willful deception. The moment where a high office was not merely misused, but actively weaponized against the public truth. The societal damage of this fabrication, as Kennedy's expansion would later suggest, was immeasurable. The map of the United States, which had shown red dots of ideological conflict, was not just a map of political arguments, it was a cartography of trauma. For 3 years, American public discourse was choked by the idea that their president was a hostile foreign agent. Families divided, friendships destroyed, death threats sent, violence in the streets. Kennedy had noted, the litany of consequences falling like stones. This wasn't collateral damage, it was the intended consequence of a lie so profoundly central to the nation's political identity. Maria Gonzalez, gripping the bench, was the living embodiment of that cost. Her son's sacrifice tainted by the very domestic betrayal Schiff had propagated. She remembered the bitter, ugly arguments at home, fueled by Schiff's certainty. Arguments that fractured her family on the very premise that her Marine son had died defending a traitor president. It was a moral failure on a grand scale. A high-ranking government official, entrusted with the sacred secrecy of the nation's intelligence, instead acted as the chief propagandist for a politically motivated investigation that 3 subsequent inquiries proved groundless. The crime wasn't just the lie, it was the persistence of the lie long after the internal intelligence had discredited it. The final, crushing realization was that Schiff's public conviction was never about protecting national security, but about securing a political outcome, an indictment, at any cost. The floor had been swept. The evidence of the Russia collusion narrative decimated by its own official postmortems. But Kennedy wasn't finished with the consequences of that narrative. He was about to introduce the evidence of how Schiff's peers had judged his conduct. Even before the mortgage fraud was exposed, the censure was the political world's attempt to wash its hands of the mess. A necessary, painful excision. Kennedy pulled out another document. This one bearing the formidable seal of the United States House of Representatives, H-Res. June 21 Street, 2023. The House of Representatives voted to censure you, Senator Schiff. The word censure echoed, heavy and condemnatory. Maria Gonzalez whispered to no one, they censured him. Kennedy read from the resolution. Ensuring the official language was heard by all watching, Representative Adam Schiff misled the American people. Abused sensitive information to which he had access. Engaged in conduct unbecoming of an elected member of the House of Representatives. The political stage had been cleared of the factual lie. Now, the institutional judgment was being delivered, setting the stage for the true betrayal of trust to be unveiled. The evidence. Let's discuss evidence, Kennedy said quietly, reaching for his folder and beginning to organize papers. Each soft rustle of documents louder than Schiff's flailing protests. Kennedy was writing on a legal pad. He let the silence stretch out. 5 excruciating counts. Before looking up, the small, patient smile never left his face. Since you've called me stupid, Senator Schiff, Kennedy said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that nonetheless commanded the room. Perhaps you'll indulge me, allow me to educate myself, and this committee, and the American people watching. He pulled out a thick, bound report. The blue cover was instantly recognizable, the Durham report. All 478 pages of it. Let's discuss what Special Counsel John Durham found about your investigation. Kennedy opened to a marked page and held it up for the cameras. The highlighted section was stark, undeniable. No predicate for investigation. The color drained from Adam Schiff's face. The gray-white pallor was harsh and unforgiving under the studio lighting. It was the face of a man watching a slow-motion catastrophe. Shall we begin? Kennedy said, his voice a lethal blend of honey and steel. With your lies to the American people. In the gallery, Maria Gonzalez leaned forward, gripping the bench, her eyes never leaving Kennedy. In the back, a Democratic staffer, sensing the absolute collapse of their political reality, quietly stood, gathered his papers, and walked for the rear exit. The first defection. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The afternoon was only beginning. And Adam Schiff, who had mocked a country lawyer, was about to learn that sometimes the quiet ones hold the sharpest blades. The scorpion's tail. Censure and the gossip parade. That's a lie. Schiff's desperate protest was cut short by the presentation of the final institutional judgment of his peers. Kennedy, unwavering, held up the next piece of evidence, a formal resolution. Res. June 21 Street, 2023. The House of Representatives voted to censure you, Senator Schiff. The word resonated with historical weight. A congressional censure is not merely a political spat. It is the institutional equivalent of professional disbarment. A scarlet letter branded onto a politician's legacy. Kennedy's analysis provided the necessary context. Only the 25th member in American history to receive such a condemnation. This was not a routine partisan skirmish, it was a rare, serious institutional repudiation of his conduct. Kennedy read directly from the resolution. Ensuring the official verdict was recorded, Representative Adam Schiff misled the American people, abused sensitive information to which he had access, engaged in conduct unbecoming of an elected member of the House of Representatives. He noted the tight vote, 213 to 209, stressing that every Republican voted in favor. And before you claim this was purely partisan, Kennedy continued, his voice softening into a dangerous conspiratorial whisper. These are anonymous quotes from your Democratic colleagues, leaked to reporters after the vote. He read them one by one, each quote a political dagger plunged into Schiff's back. He made us look like fools. We trusted him with our careers and he lied to us. His grandstanding damaged the party's credibility. Schiff's face had completed its color transformation, from the aggressive red to the exposed white. Now settling on a defeated gray. He looked like a general watching his entire command structure turn on him. He had been censured by his opponents and betrayed by his allies. That was political retribution, Schiff managed weakly. Retribution from your own party? Kennedy countered, the irony devastating. Senator, you've been officially condemned by the institution you served. Fine, let's examine the source of the politics. Kennedy held up the physical copy of the Steele dossier. This document, compiled by Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence officer, was paid for, and we know this now conclusively, by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Paid for by your party. The analysis deepened into the core ethical breach. This was a document born of opposition research, bought and paid for by a political machine. Yet, Schiff had elevated it to the status of sacrosanct intelligence. The foundational text of the collusion narrative. Kennedy opened it to the marked pages, refuting the most explosive claims with the cold facts of the subsequent investigations. Page 17. Trump campaign coordinated with Russia. Durham's conclusion. False. Never happened. Page 23. Michael Cohen met with Russian agents in Prague. Mueller verified that Cohen was provably in Los Angeles that day. Never went to Prague. Page 36. Compromising videos exist. No evidence. Ever. Anywhere. But the most damning revelation was yet to come. It was the moment the public trust wasn't merely stretched, it was consciously, knowingly broken. Kennedy produced the transcript, a smoking gun of intellectual dishonesty. This is a transcript, Kennedy said. December 2017. Classified House Intelligence Committee interview. You personally questioned Igor Danchenko, Christopher Steele's primary source for the dossier. He looked directly at Schiff, forcing eye contact. Mr. Danchenko told you under oath that some of his information might have been bar talk and hearsay. Those were his exact words, bar talk. The profound ethical breach was laid bare. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee knew, by December 2017, that the foundation of his entire narrative was based on pub gossip and unsubstantiated rumor from a single source. Yet, in January 2018, he went on CNN and declared, the evidence was more than sufficient. Those interviews were classified, Schiff protested, grasping at the final straw. You can't. They were declassified last year. Kennedy said calmly, the American people have a right to know what you knew. And when you knew it. For the first time, Kennedy's voice contained a surge of genuine, visceral emotion, transforming his analysis from a mere presentation of facts into a righteous moral indictment. You had the truth in December 2017. You knew the Steele dossier was based on gossip and hearsay. You knew the sources were questionable. And you went on CNN in January 2018 and said the evidence was more than sufficient. He set down the transcript and picked up a photograph of a simple building exterior. One United Bank headquarters in Boston. This is One United Bank headquarters in Boston. But we'll get to that later. The ominous non sequitur hung in the air. A threat of deeper revelations yet to come. The conclusion of the Russia segment was devastating. Schiff had not merely been wrong, he had been a willing participant in the propagation of a known falsehood. Leveraging the highest office of intelligence oversight to sell a fabricated story to the American public. This was more than an ethical lapse, it was the betrayal of the very concept of public trust. In the gallery, Maria Gonzalez felt tears on her face. Her family's fracture, the bitter arguments that overshadowed her son's death in 2018, were all based on this meticulously documented chain of lies. The defection continued, more Democrats stood, gathered their dignity, and exited. The gallery was now visibly less than 70% full. Kennedy's voice dropped, transitioning to the next phase of the attack. But spreading false information isn't your only problem, Senator. That's a political crime, perhaps. An ethical failure, certainly, but what you did next? He reached for the red folder. The color signaling classified information. The transition ominous and absolute. What you did next was a federal crime. The systematic betrayal. Exposing the classified leak operation. The red folder, marked with the FBI seal, represented the shift from political malfeasance to potential criminal liability. This was the true abyss. The use of classified information, the nation's most guarded secrets, not to protect America, but to execute a political hit job. Kennedy pulled out an FBI Form 302, the standard witness interview report. This particular 302 documents an interview with a Democratic staffer who worked on the House Intelligence Committee for 10 years. 10 years, Senator, a Democrat on your committee. Schiff's hands, resting on the table, were now visibly shaking. A profound physical manifestation of the sudden, acute danger. This whistleblower told the FBI that in 2017, you personally authorized the leak of classified information to media outlets. Kennedy revealed, his voice quiet, yet carrying the force of a legal deposition. He said you told your staff that the leaked information would be used to indict President Trump. The committee room exploded. This was not a partisan disagreement over interpretation. This was an allegation of profound corruption. The weaponization of the federal government's intelligence machinery for the explicit purpose of engineering the criminal prosecution of a sitting president. Reporters shouted questions. Democrats jumped to their feet in frantic protest. Chairman Graham's gavel was a relentless percussive force. Bang, bang, bang. Kennedy sat calmly through the chaos, letting the sheer weight of the accusation settle. When order was finally restored, he continued with deliberate precision. The whistleblower, Kennedy said, forcing the damning analysis back into the public record, called your conduct treasonous. The analysis intensified. The FBI interviewed him 3 times, in 2017, 2020, and again in 2023. His testimony remained consistent. He provided corroborating evidence. He named other witnesses. The FBI found him credible. Lies. He's a disgruntled former employee. This is, Schiff's voice was a strained, desperate croak. Senator, Kennedy interrupted, a final, cold statement of fact. We'll take a 15-minute recess. When we return, we'll discuss the systematic leak operation in detail. The recess was a hurricane of activity in the hallways. When the committee reconvened, the remaining gallery was leaning forward, anticipating the detailing of the betrayal. Kennedy began without preamble, returning to the FBI findings. August 12, 2025, FBI Director Kash Patel declassified portions of an investigation into classified leaks from the House Intelligence Committee. He read from the findings. A Democratic whistleblower reported that in January 2017, then Representative Adam Schiff authorized the systematic leaking of classified information to media outlets. The core intent was reiterated. Schiff stated the information would be used to indict the president. This distinction was the crucial analysis. The leaks were not for the public good, they were for political targeting. Kennedy explained the whistleblower's objection, that this was illegal, and the chilling response from other staffers. They would not be caught because they would use a systematic process. The screen behind Kennedy lit up with a flowchart, detailing the systematic leak operation. Gather intel right-pointing arrow type summary, on a standalone computer in a back room. Right-pointing arrow Schiff approval right-pointing arrow select recipient right-pointing arrow leak via cutouts. Kennedy analyzed the methodology. Intelligence Committee staffers would gather classified information. They would type summaries on a standalone computer, one not connected to any network. These summaries would be run up to you, Senator Schiff, for approval. The sophistication of the method demonstrated criminal intent, a deliberate effort to create an untraceable, off-the-books intelligence operation within the halls of Congress. Once you approved a leak, Kennedy explained, your staff would use what they called cutouts, intermediaries who couldn't be directly traced back to the committee. They would coincidentally encounter reporters at restaurants, airports, social events. Information would be shared as off-the-record or deep background. He clicked to the next slide, naming the beneficiary media outlets, CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times, and then you, Senator, would appear on these same networks and say you couldn't comment on classified information, all while knowing your staff had already leaked it. This is conspiracy theory. Schiff's voice was hoarse with strain. You have no proof. I have FBI witness statements. Kennedy said quietly. I have phone records. I have travel logs. I have text messages obtained through subpoena. Then, a sudden, unexpected twist of fate. A man stood up in the gallery. Young and visibly nervous. I have something to say. The man, David Chen, announced. Kennedy interceded to let him speak. Chen, a former intelligence staffer for Schiff, testified, his voice shaking. I worked with the Democratic staffer who went to the FBI. He showed me the computer in the back room. He said he was being forced out because he refused to participate. Because he had insufficient party loyalty. Chen looked directly at Schiff. I stayed quiet, but I saw it. I knew what was happening. And when the FBI contacted me in 2020, I told them everything. I confirmed what he said. All of it. The room was utterly silent. This was no longer just a document presentation. It was live human corroboration of a criminal scheme. A betrayal witnessed by one of Schiff's own. The evidence was overwhelming, and the focus shifted from the political cost to the criminal liability. The systematic betrayal was complete. But the escape route remained, congressional immunity. Treason or treachery, the immunity shield and its limitations. Kennedy returned to his seat, letting the devastating impact of David Chen's live testimony settle over the room. The question now was not whether the crime occurred, but whether the architecture of American law would allow the perpetrator to escape justice. Senator Schiff, the penalties for unauthorized disclosure of classified information are severe, Kennedy stated, shifting to the statutory analysis. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 793, each count carries up to 10 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250. The math was grim and absolute. The FBI has identified multiple separate leaks. Multiple counts. Multiple counts meant multiple decades of potential prison time. But the Department of Justice declined to prosecute you because of congressional immunity. Kennedy revealed, naming the shield that saved Schiff from a criminal indictment. This was the heart of the political paradox. The Speech and Debate Clause, Article 1 Section 6, Clause 1, was enshrined in the Constitution to protect legislators from executive branch persecution for their legislative work. Yet, here it was, used as a sanctuary for a staff-driven operation to weaponize intelligence against the executive branch. Kennedy's analysis dissected the immunity shield. That immunity protects you from criminal charges. But it doesn't change the facts of what you did. It doesn't protect you from this committee. It doesn't protect you from the American people knowing the truth. The political strategy was clear. Kennedy was forcing the DOJ's non-prosecution decision, a technicality, to be weighed against the overwhelming moral and ethical certainty of the crime. The public knew he got away with it. even if he wasn't officially charged. You leaked classified information for political gain. You did it systematically. You did it knowingly. And when one of your own staffers objected on grounds of conscience, you forced him out. Kennedy delivered the final verdict on the systematic leaks, his voice gaining resonance with genuine moral anger. That's not patriotism, Senator. That's not defending the Constitution. That's corruption. Schiff, completely defeated, collapsed back into his chair, his face buried in his hands. The man who began the hearing with a defiant, chest-pounding tirade was now a broken figure, consumed by the consequences of his own calculated deceptions. The transformation was total. But Kennedy wasn't finished. Leaking classified information was a crime against the state, against the abstract idea of national security. Now, Kennedy moved to the crime against the people, the direct, personal theft. Leaking classified information, Kennedy said, his voice taking on a different, more personal tone, isn't your only crime. You also defrauded the American people in a much more direct way. You stole from them. He pulled out the final thick folder. Marked mortgage fraud, federal investigation. The movement was almost casual. Yet its significance was immediate and visceral. This was not about grand geopolitical conspiracies or intelligence reports. This was about personal greed. Lies on official forms, and the mundane act of stealing from banks and taxpayers for a few $1,000s. It was the ultimate indictment of character. The screen behind Kennedy changed to two photographs side by side. A visual summary of the material hypocrisy. On the left, a substantial brick Maryland home with a pool, valued at $1.4 million. On the right, a modest California condo, valued at $450. Text appeared beneath. Both claimed as primary residence 2009 to 2020. FHA fraud. Maryland, Kennedy pointed. 3.420 square feet 4 bedrooms. Pool. And California. 650 square feet 1 bedroom. Senator Schiff, Kennedy said simply. The final shoe dropping. Let's discuss how you stole from America. The afternoon was about to get very personal. Very quickly. The thief of homes. The fraudulent affidavit and the human cost. The final act of the political execution was delivered on the most basic ground of integrity, personal honesty and financial ethics. Kennedy wasted no time on grand analysis. He drilled straight into the simple, undeniable math of fraud. In 2003, you purchased the Maryland home for $870. You obtained a Fannie Mae-backed mortgage, signing an affidavit declaring this property as your primary and principal residence. Kennedy held up the signed affidavit. The image of Schiff's signature, displayed on the screen, was the physical evidence of his first lie. 6 years later, in 2009, you purchased a condominium in Burbank, California. In your congressional district, you financed this property as well. And on this application, Kennedy held up the second document. You also declared it as your primary residence. This declaration allowed you to receive a California homeowner's tax exemption, saving you approximately $7 per year. The murmurs rippled through the gallery. A mix of shock and disgust. This was simple, petty fraud, executed by a man who oversaw the nation's intelligence apparatus. Now, Senator, I'm not a fancy lawyer like you. I'm just a country lawyer from Louisiana. But even I know that you can't have two primary residences. Kennedy explained the legal clarity. Primary residence means your true fixed and permanent home. The place where you intend to live for the majority of the year. 1, not 2. Kennedy's voice thickened with emotion, shifting the analysis from legal to moral. Because claiming a property as primary when it isn't is fraud. Senator, it's stealing better terms from the bank. It's stealing tax benefits from the state. It's stealing from honest people who tell the truth on their applications. He paused, removing his glasses and pulling out his handkerchief again. Not to clean the lenses, but to compose himself. This was the moment of manufactured sincerity. But it was anchored by a devastating truth. My mother, he said quietly, his voice catching, lost her home in 2008. Foreclosure. The room was utterly silent, captivated by the human element of the crisis. The bank had given her a loan she couldn't really afford. But when the crisis hit and she needed help, they said no. She worked 3 jobs trying to save that house. 3 jobs at 67 years old. She lost it anyway. Kennedy looked up, his eyes meeting Schiff's with an intensity that transcended politics. And you know what, Senator? She had one home. She told the truth on every form she ever signed. She played by the rules. While my mother was working 3 jobs and losing her home. Kennedy continued, the contrast searing. You were refinancing your Maryland mansion, which you also claimed as your primary residence, getting better rates because you were willing to lie. Between 2009 and 2020, Kennedy confirmed, Schiff had refinanced the Maryland property 4 times, each time signing an affidavit declaring it primary, a lie for better financial terms. The ultimate betrayal was the cynicism. A man willing to endanger national security with lies about Russia, and simultaneously willing to commit banal, white-collar fraud for personal financial gain. His corruption was total, high-minded and low-level, simultaneously treasonous and petty. Kennedy pulled out the final document. This is from William P. Y., director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Quote, the practice of claiming 2 properties as primary residence on consecutive mortgage applications for the purposes of securing favorable interest rates and tax exemptions constitutes a material misrepresentation, commonly referred to as occupancy fraud. The charge was delivered. Schiff sat frozen, staring at the folder like a man who had just received his final sentence. The 15-minute recess had not saved him. The afternoon was only half over. And Adam Schiff's political career, his moral standing, and his reputation for integrity were already in smoking ruins. Kennedy had systematically dismantled him, moving from the collapse of a national narrative to the criminal exploitation of a constitutional shield. And finally, to the theft of simple tax dollars. He had proven that Schiff's deception was not an ideology, but a character flaw. The quiet country lawyer had successfully executed the public humiliation of the nation's foremost political prosecutor. But Kennedy wasn't finished. Not even close.